Hey, I'm Molly Sims.
And I'm Emma Gormley. We're two girls obsessed with one thing, beauty.
And by that, we mean everything that makes you look
And feel
beautiful.
We're calling on our favorite health experts, industry insiders, and friends to answer all your beauty questions.
With a drink in hand.
Definitely with a drink in hand.
You're listening to Lipstick on the Rim with Molly Sims.
Oh my gosh, we are in my favorite city.
New York City, baby, on my side.
New York City, baby. We've just finished one of my favorite times of year. It happens 2 times a year. It's New York Fashion Week. And it is only fitting that we have the woman who invented New York Fashion Week with us here today.
She's a legend.
She's a legend. She is a visionary. She is an industry titan. She's most notably, and this is true, she's called the Godmother of Fashion. None other than today's guest, Miss Fern Mallis. We love you. I've known Fern for, my God, 20, 25, almost 30 years. She's the creator of New York Fashion Week. She's the global phenomenon that transformed the fashion industry and launched New York into the spotlight as the fashion capital of the world. After 2 decades, that's right, 2 decades of influential work with the CFDA and IMG Fashion, she now leads her own international consulting firm, Fern Mallis, LLC, shaping the future of the fashion world. You guys, she is a New Yorker through and through. Her legacy is undeniable. She was just recognized at the Pratt Institute Lifetime Achievement Award, FIT's President Award, and the Fashion Group's International Icon of Innovation Award, which is why we want to have her on. And last year, she was named one of the 25 most inspirational women for 2024. You're a force of nature, Fern, an innovator, a trailblazer, and a true icon. We are so thrilled to have you on the podcast today to talk about this extraordinary journey, where you've been, where you're going, where you've come from. Today's episode is all about inventing New York Fashion Week, its evolution, and building a fashion label. You guys must know brands she's in the know very early on and who her fashion icons are. Fern, I love you. I love you. I've known you. For those of you listening, it was always Paris. It was always Milan, and then it was London, and then it was New York. And honestly, Fern and her powerhouse of talent, behind her created what you know today, 2 times a year. The electricity, the innovation comes to New York City because of you and your vision. And it's so, being in the industry for so long, being a model, coming up in it, and, those moments, I still, Fashion Week just ended, and what's it going to be? What are we going to see? What are the trends? What's coming out of it? But I want to take us back. Can you tell us how in the world did you get started in this incredible industry?
Well, first of all, thank you for that extraordinary introduction. That is very sweet of you. And it's been a pleasure knowing you through those years and seeing you backstage in the tents in Bryant Park when you were modeling with everybody.
Pale and nervous. Do you smile? Do you not smile?
And I was running around with the clipboard because I was on the other side of it.
And most designers say, don't smile, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. Unless you're in a Michael Kors show and they ask you to smile and walk down the runway, be happy. But how did it all start? I grew up in Brooklyn before Brooklyn was the coolest place on the planet. And my dad worked in the garment center. He was a salesman for women's scarves. So I know how to tie scarves 1,000 ways. And his 2 brothers were in the garment district in textiles and in sportswear. And I grew up going to work with him every day off from school, every holiday. I just loved going into the city and seeing the energy in the garment district. It was the days before everything was offshore. So there were the rolling racks with textiles and the hangers and clothing getting on the trucks, and all the manufacturing was done there and the shipping. And it was a real community, and it was exciting. Everybody knew each other on the streets. It was its own little world, and I just loved it. That's where it started.
And at that time, everyone, everything was locally in New York City.
Yep. It was before people were doing things in Bangladesh and India and offshore. And, now if you go to the garment center, it's hotels and it's all sorts of businesses and office buildings. It's scattered. There's none of that manufacturing happens here anymore.
And so from that, being a little girl with your father, where did it transfer into, the big, the big leagues?
Well, he would always bring home Women's Wear Daily from work. And I grew up reading Women's Wear Daily. And, when you grow up just listening to the stories, listening to the family and his friends and people talking. So I learned a lot about the business without even knowing it. And then in high school, I won the fashion design medal because I was drawing and doing beautiful fashion clothes. And I said, I'll go to FIT. And my dad said, no. He said, if you want to be in fashion, that'll happen later. Go get a liberal arts true education. You got to get out of New York. He said, because either you or your mother have to move out of the house at that age. So I wound up going to SUNY of Buffalo because it was at that time, it was like the Berkeley of the East. It was really political, and it was, the Vietnam War, and it was all the incredible stuff going on there. And then when I was in college, I joined something called the Mademoiselle College Board. Mademoiselle magazine, if you remember Mademoiselle.
You guys, that was one of my best covers. I'm just going to say, I loved it. I loved Mademoiselle.
It was the best magazine.
It was the best.
It's a shame that people don't know that magazine.
I know.
And it was about fashion, beauty, art, literature, poetry, everything.
Yeah.
And the editors there have all went on to extraordinary jobs. And I joined the college board, and which made us like an unofficial focus group. You'd get packages in the mail about products and things, and you'd mark. Nobody had computers, nothing like that. And I stayed in touch through that college board. And then if you wanted to go to the next level, you had to submit a project, something that you designed, whether it was clothing, a poem, literature, graphics. And I was studying graphics and fine art because I thought I could get a job with that. If I did fine arts, I don't know what I could do with that, but graphics communication had potential. And I designed a little mailer, like as if you were going to subscribe to Mademoiselle with all these different foldouts. And I got a call one day from somebody that said that the Mademoiselle editor was going to be in Buffalo. Would I tour them around this school? And I didn't know and realize that I was being interviewed and being.
And you were how old at the time?
I was in college,
20s.
like 20, in the early 20s. Yeah, 20, 21, whatever. And anyway, I had this day with this editor. It was lovely. And then a short while after that, I got, and this ages me, a telegram. Remember what telegrams?
Yeah, of course.
Telegram in my mailbox that I was selected as one of the 20 guest editors. And Mademoiselle, that was their main contest initiative. They had a guest editor contest. And every year they would pick 20 students from around the country to come to New York, which for me, New York was not the deal, but stay at the Barbizon Hotel for women.
Oh my God.
And guest edit. I was the guest art editor. Other people were the guest fashion editor, the guest, managing editor, whatever. And that was the month of June. So I didn't go to my graduation because it was more important that I do the Mademoiselle guest editorship. And it was a remarkable trip. They take you on a trip every year. We went to Israel, and I remember climbing Mount Masada in long green wool outfits that we were all wearing. It was a fabulous experience. After that month, I went off like everybody did after college with a Eurail pass to Europe and came back, and my mom said, they've been calling, the magazine's been calling, they have a job for you. And I was the only one of the 20 in my group that was offered a permanent job. And I didn't have to go take my portfolio looking for a job. And so I worked for 6 years at Mademoiselle magazine. And I wound up doing all the events and merchandising and marketing in the stores. I went to every department store in America doing in-store events. I traveled with, do you remember Maury Hobson?
Yeah, of course.
Maury and people like that doing makeovers in the stores, doing everything. It was a fantastic experience.
And it was such a rising time in fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So what did that look like? At that point in time, there was no central fashion week. So how did brands showcase their products? Was it just events?
There was always Paris Fashion Week. There was always London. London was less.
Milan was Milan.
And Milan. And, Milan was always the big guns with the textiles and the big manufacturers. Paris was always the very edgy chic fashion. New York, there were shows, but if you didn't know about it, you didn't know about it. You'd go by a building on 557th Avenue and you'd see maybe a line outside. You'd think maybe it's a sample sale or something going on. But there was a fashion show going on in a showroom. There was no organization for it. There was a fashion calendar that listed things, but you had to be in
the fashion calendar, the pink
pink
one.
pages.
Exactly.
Oh, that's what we in the PR world would literally, that was our Bible.
The Bible, absolutely.
It was the
Bible.
Bible. So when did the light bulb go off for you? Like, how did it happen?
Well, I left Mademoiselle. We worked at Gimbel's East, which no longer exists. I was the fashion director of the store. I worked on 7th Avenue for a line for a while. I started my own public relations company. So it was quite a few years later. And then I ran a big international design center in Long Island City, the IDCNY, which organized all the finest, best furniture and design showrooms. I loved that world. I started in fashion, but then moved into architecture, interior design. And then there was a recession in the late 80s, and people stopped buying millions of dollars worth of furniture to furnish buildings like this that we're in. And so I took a temporary freelance job with a PR firm. And during that time, they were producing the very first 7th on Sale AIDS benefit in New York.
Remember that.
And I was very involved in the AIDS movement. I was a founding board member of DIFA, the Design Industry Foundation Fighting AIDS, and did lots of events to raise money because it was that era when all our friends were dying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every day we were going to memorial services. And so when the fashion industry finally got its act together to produce an event, it was at the Armory downtown on 26th Street in Lexington. It was magic. It was every designer had a booth that was beautifully designed by Robert Isabel, who was the party designer planner. And they were there selling their clothing wholesale, below wholesale prices. So you'd go to the booth and there would be Calvin Klein and Donna Karan and, Bill Blass, Isaac, Nicole Miller, you name it.
Oh my God.
And it was
all in one room.
4 days of people waiting online for hours to shop for 2 hours. And then the booths got restocked and over days and lines around the block. And they raised it. The CFDA was doing it with Anna Wintour. The Vogue was the sponsor. And the chairs were Donna, Calvin, Ralph, and I don't think Tom, I think those three, maybe Oscar. And when that was over, they raised like $5 million and didn't know what to do with it. And the CFDA then had an office that was maybe the size of the carpet we're on. And it was in the back of 1412 Broadway by the freight elevators. The executive director's contract wasn't renewed. Carolyn Rome was the president at the time. She resigned. And so the CFDA was starting to look for a new executive director. And I threw my hat in the ring.
Boom came in Fern Mallis, let me tell you.
And they had just identified their 5 finalists after seeing hundreds of resumes, interviewing tons of people. And I said, well, maybe I should do this. And literally they called me up the minute they got my resume and said, when can you come in? And I came in and I met with Stan Herman and a designer named Monica Tilley, who's passed away. And they were the first search committee. And Stan, and this is where everything comes back full circle in your life. I said to Stan, I met you 20 years ago. He said, really? I said, yes, when I was a Mademoiselle guest editor, we went to interview you. You were Mr. Mort. You were the designer that our group of fashion people went to meet. And he said, oh, yeah, I remember that. And I said, no, you don't. But that's okay. Stan has since become my truly very, very best friend. He's 96 years old and just published his memoir.
Oh, amazing.
And then they said, come back the next day for the next meeting. And that was with Calvin Klein, Bill Blass, Carolyn Rome. And I don't know if Stan and Monica were in that meeting, but anyway, they said, this is where they were meeting their 5. I became the 6th finalist at this point. And they said to me, you haven't been in fashion in like 10 years. Why should we hire you? And I said, I never stopped wearing clothes. And they
What
all
a great
laughed.
response.
I said, I've never stopped shopping. I never stopped looking at magazines.
Yeah.
It's in my DNA. I grew up in the
your
fashion
DNA
business.
and everything you're so curated. Like it's even more of a reason to hire you because you have experience in the art world and the architecture. And
it gives you more
dimension.
dimension.
I had just organized an entire industry in Long Island City.
Yeah.
All the architects, all the interior designers for events and activities and promotional things. It was great. So I said, I could do that with the fashion designers.
Yeah.
Why not? So, and I knew Calvin Klein at that meeting because I knew him from Fire Island days and parties. Bill Blass looked like my dad. So I was like, okay with that. And then the next meeting had to be ratified by the entire board of CFDA.
Oh, wow.
Which was every name in the book, including Eleanor Lampert, who called me that woman for years.
That woman.
And it was on my birthday. And at the end, they sent me out of the room after I had a challenge with Oscar about raising money for DIFA and Mary McFadden about raising money for the Partnership for the Homeless. I mean, it was a really extraordinary experience. And I came back into the room and they had a birthday cake and all sang happy birthday to me. And that's how I got the job at CFDA.
And
That's
what
incredible.
year was that?
1991.
Wow.
1990 at the end. It was 91. And that's when I started. And I said it would give me 2 weeks to get my life in order. And in those 2 weeks was Market Week or Fashion Week.
Right.
And if there were 50 shows in New York, there were 50 different locations. Nobody talked to each other. There was no organization. And during that week, Michael Kors had a show in an empty loft space in Chelsea. Gray, concrete, designers love that. And when they turn the bass music on, if something's not nailed down, it shakes.
Yeah.
The ceiling shook.
Stop it.
Literally the ceiling. And the show had Naomi and Linda and Cindy, and Michael always had the top girls in the shows. Plaster started to come down on the runway onto the girls' shoulders. They brushed it off and kept walking. But chunks of plaster landed in Susie Menkes's lap from the International Herald Tribune.
Oh my gosh,
Susie Menkes.
And Kerry Donovan, who was the New York Times fashion critic. And they wrote the next day, "We live for fashion. We don't want to die for it." Oh, nobody remembers what Michael showed. It was where are the emergency exits? If this gets worse, what's going on? It opened up a can of worms. And I said, I think my job description just changed.
That's amazing.
And it became
so
the
that
mission.
was the light bulb.
That was it. That was the shot heard from Sarajevo. That started it all. And I wasn't hired to do that. It was never part of the discussion even. Like, we'd like to do a fashion week and get it organized. No. But quietly, it was the industry's dream.
Right.
And so I began my job looking for empty parking lots, piers, buildings, because there was a recession. So there were a lot of buildings that stopped in midstream and trying to find a place where we could organize something. We eventually did something at the Macklowe Hotel, which was the Millennial. Macklowe, now it's the Millennial. Just to see if more than two designers would show in the same space, because their egos are such that I have to have my own
I didn't
thing.
think about that, yeah.
And my mantra was, "Hey, stupid, it's about the clothes.
Yeah.
Let's make this work." We started to register editors from all over the world, which nobody had ever done, doing outreach. And we working with the fashion calendar and those pink pages.
And you had good American talent.
We had the best talent, which was never getting the proper credit.
Yeah, so
and
true.
they were always being accused of copying Europe.
I know.
It was terrible. So then we made a deal with Bryant Park, which was just on the brink of being finished, the renovation of Bryant Park. It was Needle Park. It was Rat Park. It was horrible. Now it's probably one of the most beautiful parks anywhere. And the restaurant wasn't there. And we negotiated with that and started what we called 7th on 6th, because that was named after 7th on Sale. It was 7th Avenue moving to 6th Avenue. And we had 3 different venues, 3 different tents. And that evolved and changed over 20 years in Bryant Park. But Bryant Park became the Mecca.
It became the Mecca.
It did. The energy it had. I mean, I was in my 20s when I worked almost every fashion week. And it was, I was like the girl like checking people in. I worked in PR. And I just think that, and I don't know if you agree or not, but to me, the electric energy that existed at Bryant Park never really transferred over when it moved.
No, never. Bryant Park to me is like when you tell people if you weren't at Studio 54, you really can't experience it. You had to be there to experience it. And Bryant Park was like that.
Totally.
The ropes on the side, watching people go in, celebrities. Anybody that was anybody, because people realized this is all the media is there, all the press is there. If you're doing anything, get your client to be in a front row seat.
Yeah.
And all the models coming in, there were people hanging out back doors, just watching models come and go. It was electric, and it was a magical, magical time for the industry.
It was like the original streetwear inspired. Like that was, you'd see models walking in their outfits and
with
the shots.
With their book.
Yeah.
I was one of them in the late, 90s, mid 90s. In my book, I had my, I dressed as well as I could, not having any money. But how have you, because from what I've been told, you were very influential with designers, especially up and coming designers. How did you find them? How did you spot them? Because that became the trend, which became the designer.
Well, I also always said that Bryant Park was the Ellis Island of fashion. If you wanted to be in fashion in America, you came through the tents in Bryant Park. Because we did have, in addition to the new young designers, which I'll talk about, Gianni Versace showed there.
Did he really?
Mucha Prada showed there.
Really?
When Versace showed there, I got so much flack, I can't tell you.
Stop it. Because
some of the American fashion designers were like, how could you let him have the opening night spot? This is for America. This is for us, for the New York American designers. I said, this is a global industry.
Yeah.
I said, when Gianni Versace comes here and shows, he's bringing a plane load of Italian journalists that would not normally come here.
And you also didn't want to do what they had done to you, right? They're not going to let you show, and it'll, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. We're America. We're going to let them all in.
Yeah.
I mean, and I still have in my table in my dining room 4 seat cushions that were the Medusa heads, the black and gold, which he had on throughout the entire venue of like 1,200 seats.
I would have just been running through and stealing pillows.
I would have been stealing as well.
And it was amazing, and it put us in a whole new place.
Yeah.
Same thing when Prada showed there, and all sorts of people showed there. But I always had a smaller venue that was the least amount of money. And if we could, we would get it sponsored so that it could be underwritten for emerging designers. And people would send in their portfolios and send that stuff to us. And
what were you looking for?
You're looking for a spark. You're looking for something you haven't seen before. You're meeting somebody who you're just captivated by. You're just like, oh my God, this kid is going to be great.
Who do you think has the spark now that you're seeing?
You want to know who my favorite new young designer is?
Yes.
Max Alexander.
Max Alexander. I don't know.
He's 8 years old. And you have to follow him. It's Couture to the Max.
Max?
He lives in Bel Air. He's coming to New York tomorrow or the next day. And I'm taking him to a bunch of shows. I took him last season. I'm his fashion fairy godmother. It's called Couture to the Max.
Couture to the Max.
He's designed a vest and a puffer jacket that can't keep in stock. They're selling out on his website. He is the real deal. It's extraordinary. He cuts, sews, lays out patterns. This Parker he did in gold is gold lame with these wings on the back. And he found 2 old gold lame shirts at a thrift shop. He's all about sustainability.
And he's 8.
And 8 years old. And he's washing them. You see him on the videos washing them in his tub, cleaning them out, lays them out, lays a pattern, cuts it all out. Watch him threading the machines and the needles. He's got a whole studio in his home with all the fabrics and trims and everything. And his machine does all the fancy embroideries. And he put this, I own one of the jackets. I get compliments like crazy. He's adorable. I mean, he's a prodigy. He's a little Mozart.
That's incredible. Anyone else? That's a little older than 8.
There's a team of 2 young boys that I'm very fond of called Tanner and Fletcher.
Oh yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah.
And I think that they're doing really, really sweet stuff, and the way they present it is very clever.
Because we've gone through a hard time.
Yeah,
we've gone through. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. At one point, I thought, "Are we going to lose New York Fashion Week?"
Well, people still think we've lost it because it's nothing like what it was. The energy is changed.
Yeah.
It's very different. Nothing is organized. IMG this past season said they're not even doing an organized venue anymore.
Right.
The calendar is not helpful. There's a different kind of calendar out there now that doesn't have everything on it. So you can't find out where things are and who's doing what. There's more shows than anybody knows what to do with. And you have to make decisions every day. Well, you know what? I can't go to that show because this show is in Brooklyn and the next one is in Harlem.
Well, that was what that was what the brilliance of
the centralized venue.
the centralized venue, because you could do 3-4 shows. I mean, and you get to see everything. If not,
Fashion is magical. I just think that, I've worked in fashion my entire career, other than a blip in baby food. But,
it was a moment.
It was a moment, learning. But I just think it's such a magical thing. And I think that, I feel sad for what it has become and what it's lost.
I mean, fashion is fashion. Nothing will replace a live runway show, no matter how much digital and
it was just funny. It's one of our
streaming.
questions. Now you're just seeing it digitally. They don't even have an audience. It's like but there's no magic.
No,
I mean, so beautiful.
And most of the revenue is online.
Yeah,
everything's changing. The whole retail scenario is changing.
Fast fashion. It's changed everything.
Although I have a friend, I have to tell you, every time I see her, I said, "That's fabulous." She goes, "Zara,
yeah,
that's fabulous. Zara, $32. That's fabulous. H&M." But the whole sustainability thing that this fast fashion has brought on is an issue that the industry has to reconcile and is trying to. It's not easy, but the consumer has to really decide. I'm not buying that if I don't know where it's made and I don't know. What the fabric content is, or I don't know what the factories are like. And it's a big problem.
Do you think we could ever go back to the magic of what it was?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. Once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. Something else is going to have to evolve. And I'm not sure what that is. I know there's discussions. There's a lot of people. There's New York City for the partnership, and a lot of agencies are trying to figure out what could we do for New York to make fashion fabulous again in New York. And I hope to be part of those conversations.
I hope you are too.
To switch gears a little, it is interesting to see what comes in, what goes out, what comes in. We were in Prada. And, back in the day, Prada was everything to me. Like, I saved my modeling I saved my everything. Like, I would buy one piece, or I had a great, gorgeous green jacket, belted, early 2000s. And, Prada's back.
Yeah.
You don't count Prada out
You
ever.
never count Miuccia back. I mean,
I wish I would have kept all my bags.
I know. It is interesting
Just
to
need
see,
warehouses.
Yeah.
What comes in, what goes out. I've actually had a moment in the past to follow up with sustainability and just playing my part. When I had no money, all I shopped was vintage. I was Steinberg and Tolkien in London. I had my places in Italy. I had my places in Milan because, again, I couldn't afford.
Vintage is great.
And I've kind of gone back to that. And
vintage is having a renaissance
It's
now.
having a renaissance. I think because of that. I think, listen, Zara will always be Zara. I it's great. You can grab something fast fashion, but there is something about just having that real thing, that quality, and my mom, she grew up in the Depression, so she always saved. So what other stories do you have in terms of those moments that you're like, I can't, if I would have fly on the wall, no one would believe that I was there?
Oh God. There's so many I can't even think of.
Give us your favorite.
Well, you were with all the models. I mean, you're with Kate, Christy, Linda, Cindy, that must have been a
girls were incredible. I mean, one of my memorable moments was being backstage when Kevin Aquan stopped me.
Oh.
And I mean, he was the best hugger in the world.
Oh, loved.
And he said, "Sit down." And he started to tweeze my eyebrows. And I used to have very thick eyebrows. And he tweezed them to a ne'er-do-well, which years later I wanted to kill him. But the experience was like, oh yes, just your hands on my
was-
face, I'm in heaven.
I just think it was that moment of like the waiting, and then it was you got to see it. And I remember, you know, saving my money to get my magazines. You know, I'm from Kentucky in the middle. There wasn't, you know, whether it be Vogue or Mademoiselle or
Wednesdays were magazine drop days. I knew that to a T from I was the age of 10, 11.
And my mom would, you know, she would
Yeah.
purchase the magazines for me, and we'd go through it, you know, and it was such an interesting time, and it was so exciting.
Yeah, and that was great. I mean, there were moments when I was at the CFDA when at Christmas time, we got all the members to design a little Santa Claus or Mrs. Claus outfit on a little hanger. And they became the centerpiece of the Christmas tree at the White House.
Oh, wow.
And I kill myself to this day that we never took pictures of every one of them before we sent them off. They all came to our office, and one was more fantastic than the next. They're somewhere in the Library of Congress somewhere. But, you know, then we got the whole CFDA invited for one of the Christmas parties at the White House. This is the Clinton administration, you know, and I remember we got Hillary to be honorary chair of Fashion Target's breast cancer, working with Ralph Lauren, who designed the Target, blue Target t-shirt.
Oh, I remember that.
And we launched that with her at the White House. You know, those moments where we were upstairs in the private quarters and able to go through the Lincoln bedroom and everything with Ralph and Ricky and Donna and Calvin and Oscar. And I remember standing on the portico outside where you look down at the Washington Monument, and Ralph and Ricky Lauren is standing there, and Ralph goes, I could get used to this. I could do this. And I kept saying, I'm going to save that for my book. You know, I mean, moments like that were really, really special.
Were you ever wrong on a designer? Where you're like, that's never going to work?
There were a few. There's one that's, I'm trying to remember his name now. He's actually in jail, I think.
There was some bad behavior
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah, but for the most part, I loved working with the designers. And I loved creating the new young designers. And, you know, I mean, I just came back from a week in India where I was there for a designer named Sabyasachi, who has an extraordinary store in New York at 160 Christopher Street. It will take your breath away. But I worked on Fashion Week in India for 10 years and helped create Berlin Fashion Week, Lakme Fashion Week in Mumbai. When I was at IMG, when I left CFDA, we started Fashion Weeks all over the world. Berlin, we bought the Fashion Weeks in Australia. And then we bought the one in Moscow, and we created in Toronto. I mean, and Mexico City. I mean, I used to say IMG was Fashion Weeks all over the world were pearls, and IMG was the necklace stringing them all together. You know, and so I became like this global ambassador, going to Japan, going to Dubai, going to all these places, which would say, we want to do a Fashion Week. Talk to us. How do we do this? You know, how do we sell the sponsorship? What do you do? We became the example for it. But in India, I fell in love with that the first night I got off the plane. And I loved working with those designers. And Sabyasachi was somebody who did an extraordinary show. I mean, I remember being there with some journalists and going, who is this kid? You know, and 25 years later, he just celebrated his 25th anniversary in Mumbai on the 25th of 2025, flew a ton of people, Neiman, Saks, everybody, all of us over to celebrate with him. And he created inside this convention center, replicated old Calcutta, which is where he's headquartered, and created these buildings and sets and the fountain in the middle. And I was sitting next to Susie Menkes watching the show. And when I saw him 25 years ago, I became a fan. And like a couple of years later, brought him to New York to do his first show in New York City, which then introduced him to Susie and the retailers. And now he's the Ralph Lauren of India. He's carrying the mantle of luxury fashion in India to the world. I mean, in a way that is mind-boggling. Christy Turlington closed the show. You know, it was brilliant. You have to look that up and watch. I mean, the clothing is extraordinary. I mean, and I love doing that, being able to bring somebody from India to New York to help launch their business in a way, you know, and stay involved with them.
So what's next? for Fern Mallis?
Well, there's a documentary being done on me.
Oh,
I
it's
heard.
amazing.
A little birdie told me.
It's being called so far the Godmother of Fashion. And the crew actually came to India because they wanted to see me in my
Element
there, which was great. I'm still doing what I'm doing now, which is Fashion Icons with Fern Mallis, which is when I left Fashion Week. That came out of, this was also a remarkable opportunity. I didn't know what I was going to do. I left IMG. I said, I'm taking a year off. Let me smell the roses and let me stay at my house in the country for longer than a long weekend.
Yeah.
And, and then all of a sudden the phone started ringing. And I called it, the phone started ringing. Hi, I have a new project. Can I take you out for a cup of coffee? Hi.
Because they want to, they want to
The
get
insight you
They want to
have.
get your insight, but they also want to get your approval.
Well, a
Yeah.
lot of that. And it was like somebody said, I should call you. We have a new startup. Can we take you out for a cup of coffee? Everybody's calling me up for a cup of coffee. Nobody wanted to take me to lunch or dinner. And I called it the coffee phase of my life.
That's amazing.
And out of that coffee phase of my life, I was invited to tea at Timothy Greenfield Sanders, who we adore. And he said, I'm going to introduce you to somebody at the 92nd Street Y. Well, he was going to introduce me to a friend of his who was like an agent who represented a lot of people. And so we met and we had lunch. So that was a good start. And she said, I'm going to introduce you to this woman at the 92nd Street Y who does all this programming. And 92Y, if you don't know, is the most prestigious cultural center in New York. It's 150 years old. And presidents, prime ministers, actors, authors, anybody doing anything speaks up there in their speaker series. Plus, they have a huge dance program all the time. Revelations from Alvin Ailey was first performed at the 92Y before it was seen anywhere else in the world. It's an extraordinary place. So I had a cup of coffee with Susan from the Y, Susan Engel, and she said, we would like to do something with fashion designers. And we've only had one-offs here and there. Would you be interested in hosting this? And I said, I'm usually the one being interviewed, but I guess I could ask some intelligent questions. So we said, let's call it Fashion Icons with Fern Mallis. She said, you think you can get some good people? I said, let me try.
Let me try.
Let me try.
Being modest.
Let me try. So actually the first one I did was Norma Kamali because Norma's an old dear friend.
Love.
I cut my teeth with Norma. I had index cards that were fumbling and I spent too much time on certain subjects, but I learned it but it was great. The next one was Calvin Klein. And when Calvin came onto the stage at the Y, 900 people in their seats who bought tickets. And I said, thank you for doing this and being here. Why did you agree to do this? You're not launching. You're not launching anything. Yeah. You sold your business 10 years ago. You're not hyping a new fragrance, nothing.
Totally.
And he said, I'm here because you asked me.
Aww.
And I said, great answer.
Yeah.
And when Calvin did it, it opened the doors.
Yeah.
And then it was Donna and it was Marc Jacobs and Michael Kors and Diane and Andre Leon Talley and Polly Mellon. And
Andre Leon Talley.
Andre Leon Talley.
But my favorite one from the first season that I did was Bill Cunningham.
Oh, love Bill Cunningham. New York Times photographer, the best of the best of the best.
Can we watch it online?
You can watch some of it, and it's in the first book because I did.
Okay.
I have 2 books, and we're working on the 3rd, Fashion Icons.
I'm gonna watch that.
Okay,
and that series has been going on for 15 years, and I've done over like 60 interviews, and it's the longest running series at the 92nd Street Y. Next week, I'm doing Rebecca Minkoff.
Oh, we love Rebecca.
So that's one, and there's several other people that I'm going to be doing. I'll have to get you one of these days on there.
Listen, Fern Mallis. I could talk to you forever.
Yeah.
We love you. We always do a little rapid fire before we go. Favorite clothing item you own?
I was thinking about that. I'd have to say it's my watch because it's a Bulgari watch that I love. That was a gift to me by my younger sister on my 50th birthday. And she passed away like 8 years ago. And I've been wearing it ever since I got it, which was 25 years ago.
What's your signature scent?
It's called Gull Rouge. It's the purest essence of rose from a line called La Lenore. And it is the purest essence from India. And it was then developed with the French perfumers. And it's I get so many compliments from it. It's rose and it's beautiful.
What's your favorite bag?
Favorite bag? I probably only use, I had 2 shoulder replacements. So through the years, I stopped carrying big, heavy bags. And I'm not an it bag person. I hate having a bag that, oh, that's the bag. It's a like a pouch that's crossbody, and I have it in a million colors. And it's from a designer in Germany named Gabrielle Franzen. And she is the best. And I use them. I interchange them, and I change the different straps with them. It's a great bag.
What's your favorite season to dress for?
I'd say spring and fall, like the middle seasons I like.
A fashion trend you wish would go out of fashion?
Nude dressing.
Oh my God. I
that's
can't.
that.
3 things we don't know about you.
That I'm a real softie. I mean, I will cry at a commercial. I'm a cat lady.
Love it.
I love my little black cat dimples. And I'm a good cook.
I did not know that.
What's your signature dish?
I make a great linguine with clams.
Ooh.
And what else do I make? I cook in the country, like grill and whatever, but I like to cook when I have company.
We always ask every guest before we go, what advice would you give your 10-year-old self?
Save your money and learn finances. I always never really paid attention to that because I always thought somebody else would for me. And I to this day, I really wish I understood a spreadsheet better, and really learned about money.
It is good advice.
It is. I need to listen to that. I've gotten better.
She has gotten better.
I money would burn a hole in my pocket.
She has a shopping addiction. She loves fashion.
I love fashion.
We all do.
Oh, my God. But this one over here, she truly
it's research for me. Like I go to the
She
mall
loves
just to
it.
look at
She
things.
loves-
Well, that's what I do. I say it's
I
R&D.
love-
It's
I love
R&D.
R&D.
It's research.
It's R&D.
I love to touch and feel and look.
I can buy something anywhere in the world. And people will travel with me. They're like, I got to step in this shop. I got to walk in. I mean, there's not a shop I don't stick my head in.
It's genetic. My mother and my grandmother were the exact same.
Yeah.
I love that.
I'm
say it's R&D, research and development.
It's going to be my tagline.
You are our fairy godmother. You are our fairy fashion godmother. You truly are an icon. Thank you so much.
I'm ready for the documentary.
Honestly, I'm ready for the documentary.
Thank you.
Please follow at Fern Mallis. Honestly, her jaunts still to this day are amazing, and you will get a little glimpse into her life on a daily basis. And check out Fashion Icons with Fern Mallis. It's a series at the92ny.org.
A living legend here with us.
A living
legend.
legend. I love it. And we love you. And
I love you too.
Well, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
You guys, we will see you next week on Lipstick on the Rim. Make sure and follow us at Lipstick on the Rim. Misha and I both have Substacks, which you can get a little bit more of a deep dive into our lives, what we're loving more, what you need.
Love you.
Love you. And I love you.
And I love you.
Thanks for listening to Lipstick on the Rim with Molly Sims and my ride or die, Emisha Gormley. We are so excited to bring you guys along on this journey with us. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Lipstick on the Rim and at Molly B. Sims. Or you can go to my blog where you can dive just a little bit deeper into my favorite products, trends, and more at mollysims.substack.com. And don't forget to check out our video episodes on my YouTube channel, Molly Sims. This podcast is a production with Sony Music. I wanted to give a special thanks to my team, Rosie Cummings, Kenna Ryan, Safine Kevorkian, and everyone at Sony Music. Don't forget to listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss out on the fun.